The blue light filled the United Nations Assembly Hall like water filling a bowl. Everyone stopped talking. The air itself seemed to hum with strange energy that made their teeth ache. Then the light took shape. Ambassador Zethka stood 12 feet tall, made of what looked like living crystal. Blue veins of energy pulsed through its transparent body. When it spoke, the voice came from everywhere at once, translated into dozens of languages by technology humans could barely understand. People of Earth, the crystalline being said, the Galactic Council requires your service. Secretary General Maria Santos gripped her podium. She had been preparing for this moment ever since humanity made first contact 5 years ago. The Council had been polite but distant, treating Earth like a small child who might someday be useful. Today felt different. The Devourers have consumed the Kepler 438 system, Zethka continued. 17 billion souls devoured in 3 days. The war has reached a critical phase. You will provide soldiers. The assembly erupted in whispers. Dr. Sarah Chen, sitting in the science advisory section, leaned forward. She had studied every piece of information the Council had shared about these Devourers, parasitic creatures that consumed entire worlds, leaving nothing behind but empty space. The Council had been fighting them for 300 years. How many soldiers? Secretary General Santos asked. 500,000 of your people, armed with Council weapons, trained in basic combat. You have 6 months to comply. The number hit the assembly like a physical blow. 500,000 people. The largest military deployment in human history would be sent to fight aliens on the other side of the galaxy. And if we refuse? Asked General Marcus Stone. The old soldier had fought in Earth's resource wars. His scarred face showed no emotion, but his voice carried weight. Zethka's crystal body brightened. Economic sanctions. No more trade agreements. No more technology sharing. No more protection from hostile species who view humans as inferior. The threat was clear. Earth depended on galactic trade now. Asteroid mining operations, fusion technology, medical advances that had eliminated most diseases. All of it came through Council partnerships. Without them, humanity would be isolated and vulnerable. Dr. Chen raised her hand. The crystalline ambassador's faceted head turned toward her. We need to understand our enemy, she said. What exactly are these Devourers? How do they fight? What are their weaknesses? They consume, Zethka replied simply. Matter, energy, information. Everything they touch becomes part of their collective. They learn from what they devour. Each world they take makes them stronger, smarter, more dangerous. But there must be patterns, Dr. Chen pressed. Behaviors we can predict. The ambassador's crystal body flickered with what might have been annoyance. Your primitive minds cannot comprehend the complexity of galactic warfare. You will be given weapons. You will be given targets. You will fight until victory or death. General Stone stepped forward. With respect, Ambassador, humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years. We might have different ideas about strategy. Your planet has never faced an enemy like this, Zethka said coldly. The Devourers have consumed 47 star systems. They have adapted to every weapon, every tactic the Council possesses. Only overwhelming numbers can stop them now. Dr. Chen felt something cold in her stomach. 47 systems, hundreds of billions of lives, and the Council's answer was to throw more soldiers at the problem. What about negotiation? Asked Ambassador Liu from the Chinese delegation. Has anyone tried to communicate with them? The crystal being's laugh sounded like breaking glass. One does not negotiate with a virus human. One destroys it before it spreads. Secretary General Santos looked around the assembly. Every face showed the same mix of fear and determination. Earth had fought its way up from a divided, war-torn planet to a unified world that could reach for the stars. Now those same stars were asking them to bleed. We need time to discuss this, she said. 6 months, Zethka repeated. Report to Kepler Station with your soldiers. The Council will provide transport and basic training. Do not disappoint us, humans. The galaxy is watching. The blue light collapsed inward and the ambassador vanished. The assembly hall felt suddenly cold and ordinary, like waking up from a vivid dream. The argument started immediately. Some delegates wanted to comply fully, seeing it as humanity's chance to prove themselves worthy of galactic citizenship. Others called it exploitation, using human lives as cheap ammunition in an alien war. Dr. Chen found herself studying the data files Zethka had left behind. Technical specifications of devourer biology, battle reports from the front lines, casualty statistics that made her feel sick. But something nagged at her. The patterns were wrong. She pulled up her portable computer and started running analysis programs. The Devourers attacked in waves, yes, but not random waves. There was purpose behind their movements, intelligence in their choice of targets. They weren't just consuming everything they found. They were being selective. General Stone appeared at her shoulder. "Find something interesting, Doctor?" "Maybe," she said, highlighting sections of the data. "Look at these attack patterns. The Council says the Devourers are mindless consumers, but they're avoiding certain types of planets. They skip worlds with heavy radiation. They ignore gas giants. They only attack planets with complex ecosystems, so they're picky eaters. What does that tell us?" Dr. Chen frowned at the screen. "I don't know yet, but it tells us they're not mindless. They're making choices based on some kind of criteria, and if they can choose, maybe they can be reasoned with." The general's scarred face was thoughtful. The Council's been fighting this war for 3 centuries without trying to understand their enemy. Just throwing soldiers at the problem until it goes away. "And it's not working," Dr. Chen said quietly. "They're losing ground every year. The Devourer territory keeps expanding." Around them, the assembly continued its heated debate. Some delegates were already calculating how to select 500,000 volunteers. Others were drafting letters of protest to send to the Council. But Dr. Chen kept staring at the data, feeling like she was looking at a puzzle with missing pieces. The Council wanted cannon fodder. They wanted humans to charge into battle with basic weapons and overwhelming numbers. It was the same strategy they had used for 300 years. And for 300 years, it had been failing. She closed her computer and looked at General Stone. "What if we don't give them what they're expecting?" "What do you mean?" "They want soldiers, 500,000 bodies to throw at the enemy. But what if we send something else instead?" The general's eyes sharpened. "Doctor, that sounds dangerously close to treason." "No," Dr. Chen said, watching the blue energy signature still lingering in the air where the ambassador had stood. "It sounds like thinking outside the box, something the Council apparently stopped doing a long time ago. 6 months suddenly didn't seem like very much time at all." The war room in Geneva buzzed with activity. Holographic displays showed Earth's military capabilities, population data, and transport schedules. Everyone was working on the same problem: how to select and train 500,000 soldiers in 6 months. Everyone except General Marcus Stone. He stood at the back of the room, watching his colleagues plan conventional military deployment. They were thinking about weapons training, physical fitness, basic combat tactics, standard procedure for standard warfare. But this wasn't standard warfare. The enemy had been winning for 3 centuries against species far more advanced than humanity. Something was fundamentally wrong with the Council's approach. "General Stone," Secretary General Santos called. "Your thoughts on the selection criteria?" Stone walked to the central display. "I think we're asking the wrong question." The room went quiet. Defense Minister Okafor frowned. "What do you mean?" "The Council wants 500,000 soldiers. But they've been throwing soldiers at this problem for 300 years. It's not working." Stone gestured at the casualty reports floating in the air. "They're losing. Badly." Dr. Chen entered the room carrying a stack of data tablets. "The general's right. I've been analyzing the battle reports. The Council's tactics haven't changed in decades. They use the same formations, the same weapons, the same strategies. The Devourers have adapted to all of it." Admiral Reyes looked skeptical. "So what are you suggesting? That we refuse to help?" "No," Stone said. "I'm suggesting we help differently." He activated his personal display and overlaid new data on the existing projections. "What if we don't send 500,000 soldiers? What if we send 50,000 specialists instead?" The room erupted in protests. Defense Minister Okafor was the loudest. "The Council specifically requested 500,000 troops. We can't just ignore their requirements." "Why not?" Dr. Chen asked. "They're treating us like disposable cannon fodder. Maybe it's time to show them what humans are actually good at." Stone nodded. "Dr. Chen has identified patterns in devourer behavior that the Council missed. What else might they be missing? What advantages might humans have that they don't know about?" He pulled up Earth's military history. "Humans have always excelled at asymmetric warfare. We've won conflicts against superior enemies by thinking differently, not by matching their strength." Secretary General Santos studied the displays. "What kind of specialists are you talking about?" "Combat engineers who can build weapons from scrap metal. anthropologists who understand alien psychology, hackers who can break into systems the Council thinks are secure. Stone's scarred face was animated now. Artists who see patterns others miss. Philosophers who can think outside established frameworks. Dr. Chen pulled up her latest analysis. The Devourers aren't just consuming matter and energy. They're consuming information. Every battle teaches them something new about Council tactics. We need people who can feed them false information, create unpredictable scenarios, break their learning patterns. Admiral Reyes shook her head. You want to send musicians and philosophers to fight an alien war? I want to send humans, Stone said simply. Real humans with all the creativity and unpredictability that makes us human, not pale imitations of galactic soldiers. Defense Minister Okafor was reading through the personnel files Stone had prepared. This is insane. You want to send a jazz musician to fight parasitic aliens? That jazz musician spent 10 years improvising with broken instruments in war zones, Stone replied. She knows how to create beauty from chaos. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need. Dr. Chen added more data to the display. I've been studying the Devourers' attack patterns. They respond predictably to standard tactics. But what if we did something completely unexpected? What if we retreated when we should advance? What if we played music instead of shooting? What if we tried to communicate instead of fight? The room fell silent. Finally, Secretary General Santos spoke. The Council will be furious if we don't deliver what they asked for. The Council has been losing this war for 3 centuries, Stone said. Maybe it's time to be furious back. Over the next 3 months, they built something unprecedented. Instead of massive training camps, they created small, specialized schools. Combat engineers learned to improvise weapons from alien materials. Linguists studied Devourer communication patterns. Psychologists developed theories about hive mind behavior. The selection process was unlike anything in military history. They recruited people based on creativity rather than physical strength. Problem-solving ability rather than marksmanship. The ability to think under pressure rather than follow orders without question. Maya Okonkwo was typical of the new recruits. An artist from Lagos who specialized in interactive installations, she had never held a weapon in her life. But she understood how to communicate complex ideas through nonverbal means. Her art could make people feel emotions they didn't expect. I don't understand why you want me, she told her recruitment officer. I paint pictures and build sculptures. I don't fight wars. Maybe that's exactly why we need you, the officer replied. Dr. Elena Vasquez joined from the University of Barcelona. She was an expert in xenobiology and animal behavior, but her real talent was pattern recognition. She could look at seemingly random data and find hidden connections. The Devourers are exhibiting learned behaviors, she told Dr. Chen during training. Like animals adapting to environmental pressures. But animals can be retrained if you change the environment correctly. James Wright came from the Australian military, but not as a soldier. He was a specialist in unconventional warfare, the kind of tactics that worked when you were outnumbered and outgunned. His expertise was making the impossible look easy. Standard military doctrine says you never retreat unless forced to, he explained to a mixed group of artists, scientists, and engineers. But what if retreat is your opening move? What if surrender is your weapon? The training was unlike anything the recruits had experienced. Instead of learning to follow orders, they learned to think independently. Instead of standardized responses, they practiced improvisation. Instead of defeating enemies, they learned to understand them. Dr. Chen made breakthrough after breakthrough in her analysis of devourer behavior. The more she studied them, the more convinced she became that the Council was fundamentally misunderstanding their enemy. They're not just mindless consumers, she explained to General Stone. They're traumatized survivors. Look at these patterns. They only attack worlds with complex ecosystems. They avoid dead planets completely. It's like they're searching for something specific. What kind of something? I think they're trying to rebuild what they lost. The Council thinks they're expanding aggressively, but what if they're actually trying to go home? General Stone studied the data. Home to what? That's what we need to find out. As the 6-month deadline approached, Earth's unconventional force took shape. 50,000 volunteers, each chosen for their ability to think differently. They were trained not just in combat, but in communication, creativity, and crisis resolution. The Council's transport ships arrived right on schedule. Massive vessels that could carry hundreds of thousands of troops across interstellar distances. Their captains expected to load 500,000 human soldiers. Instead, they found artists carrying musical instruments, scientists with portable laboratories, and engineers with toolkits full of improvised devices. When the Council's military liaison saw the human force, his reaction was immediate and loud. "Where are your soldiers?" demanded War Marshal Thex IV, a reptilian being whose scales reflected authority and displeasure. "We were promised 500,000 troops, not 50,000 civilians." General Stone stepped forward. "You were promised 500,000 humans. These are humans. These are not warriors." "No," Stone agreed. "There's something better. They're humans." Kepler Station hung in space like a metal flower, its massive arms extending into the dark. Each section housed a different council species, their areas designed around their biological needs. The crystalline Nexari lived in chambers filled with energy fields. The aquatic Delphians required pressurized water environments. The mechanical constructs inhabited sections that looked more like factories than living quarters. The humans were assigned to the smallest section, originally designed for storage. War Marshal Thex IV had made his displeasure clear. If Earth wanted to send musicians and scientists instead of real soldiers, they could live in supply closets. Maya Okonkwo stood at the observation deck, watching council ships prepare for departure to the front lines. Each vessel was perfectly designed for its species' combat doctrine. Nexari ships were smooth and flowing, built to channel energy weapons. Threx vessels looked like metallic hives designed for swarm tactics. Delphian ships moved like swimming creatures even in space. "Beautiful," she murmured, sketching the formations in her notebook. Dr. Elena Vasquez joined her at the window. "And completely predictable. Look at how they organize themselves. Same patterns every time." Maya studied the movements with an artist's eye for composition. "They're not just predictable. They're stuck. Each species can only fight one way. Because they can only think one way," Elena said. "The Nexari evolved from energy beings, so they see everything in terms of power flows. The Threx are hive creatures, so they think in terms of collective action. But humans are mutts," Maya finished. "We evolved from a dozen different survival strategies. We can think like pack hunters or individual predators. We can cooperate or compete. We can be logical or emotional." Dr. Chen approached them, carrying a data tablet full of observational notes. "I've been studying their military briefings. 300 years of the same tactics over and over. No innovation, no adaptation, no creativity." She pulled up tactical displays showing the current front lines. The Nexari always lead with energy bombardment. The Threx always follow with swarm attacks. The Delphians always try to flow around enemy positions. The constructs always build fortified positions. "And the Devourers have learned to counter all of it," Elena said. "Exactly. They've turned the Council's predictability into a weapon." Dr. Chen highlighted sections of the battle reports. "Every time a Council fleet attacks, the Devourers know exactly what's coming. They can prepare counters before the battle even starts." Maya closed her sketchbook. "So what are we supposed to do about it? War Marshal Thex IV won't even let us near the real planning sessions." "That might be a blessing," said James Wright, joining their conversation. The unconventional warfare specialist had been observing Council operations for weeks. Their planning sessions are exercises in groupthink. No dissent, no alternative perspectives, no room for new ideas. He gestured toward the command deck where alien officers moved with mechanical precision. "They've institutionalized failure. Everyone knows their role, follows their protocols, and never questions the system." Dr. Elena Vasquez pulled up biological data on her tablet. "It makes sense from an evolutionary perspective. Each species developed successful survival strategies on their homeworlds. Those strategies got encoded into their neural patterns, their social structures, their technology. But successful adaptation requires flexibility," Dr. Chen added.
"The ability to change when circumstances change."
These species seem to have lost that ability. Maya watched a group of Threx soldiers moving in perfect formation, each individual responding to subtle chemical signals from the others. They're not really individuals anymore. They're components in a larger machine. A machine that's been running the same program for 3 centuries, James said grimly. Over the following weeks, the humans spread throughout Kepler Station like water finding cracks in stone. Officially, they were assigned to cultural liaison duties and logistical support roles. Unofficially, they were learning everything they could about galactic warfare. Dr. Chen embedded herself with the Nexari Science Division, ostensibly to learn about their energy weapons technology. What she actually learned was how the Nexari thought about problems. Everything was about power levels, frequency modulation, and harmonic resonance. They couldn't conceive of solutions that didn't involve energy manipulation. "What about kinetic weapons?" she asked during one briefing. The Nexari scientist's crystalline form flickered with confusion. "Why would you use crude matter when pure energy is available? Different approaches might catch enemies by surprise. Surprise is inefficient. Overwhelming power is reliable." Maya found herself working with the Threx communication core, theoretically helping to coordinate messaging between different species. But she quickly realized that Threx communication was purely functional. They had no concept of art, beauty, or emotional expression. "Why do you make sounds with no tactical purpose?" a Threx drone asked, referring to her humming while she worked. "Music isn't about tactics. It's about connection, emotion, shared experience. Emotion is a distraction from optimal function. Maybe emotion is the function." The drone's compound eyes stared at her without comprehension. James Wright volunteered for Delphian combat simulations, claiming he wanted to understand their fluid tactical approaches. What he discovered was that Delphian tactics were literally fluid. They flowed around obstacles like water, but couldn't adapt when the environment changed unexpectedly. "What if the enemy blocks all flow paths?" he asked during a simulation. The Delphian commander's tentacles rippled with distress. "All paths cannot be blocked. Water always finds a way. But what if they could be blocked? Such a scenario is impossible. We do not plan for impossible scenarios." Dr. Elena Vasquez joined construct engineering teams, supposedly to learn about their construction techniques. But she became fascinated by their inability to build anything that wasn't perfectly optimized for its intended function. "What about redundancy?" she asked, watching them design a weapons platform. "Backup systems? Alternative uses?" The construct engineer's mechanical voice was flat. "Redundancy is waste. Each component serves its optimal function. Deviation reduces efficiency, but flexibility allows adaptation to changing conditions. Conditions do not change. Parameters are defined. Systems are optimized." Slowly, a picture emerged. The council races had achieved perfect efficiency within their specialized niches. But perfection had become a prison. They could no longer innovate, adapt, or think outside their evolutionary programming. Meanwhile, Dr. Chen continued analyzing Devourer data. Her breakthrough came during her third week on the station, while reviewing captured biological samples in the Nexari laboratories. "These aren't random mutations," she told Elena over their evening meal. "Look at these cellular structures. They're incredibly sophisticated. This level of biological organization doesn't happen by accident." Elena studied the data. "You're right. These creatures were designed. But designed for what? That's what I've been trying to figure out." Dr. Chen pulled up more files. "The council keeps calling them parasites, but their behavior is wrong for parasites. Parasites don't usually kill their hosts completely. They keep them alive to continue feeding. But the devourers consume everything." "Exactly. They're not parasites. They're something else entirely." Maya looked up from her own work. "What if they're not the disease? What if they're the cure?" Both scientists stared at her. "I mean, look at what they do," Maya continued. "They consume failing systems completely, break them down to basic components, then rebuild something new. That's not destruction. That's renovation." Dr. Chen felt something click in her mind. "Oh my God. What if you're right? What if the Devourers aren't trying to destroy the galaxy? What if they're trying to fix it?" Elena pulled up star charts showing Devourer expansion patterns. "But fix it from what?" Dr. Chen was already running new analysis programs. "I need to look at this data differently, not as invasion patterns, but as intervention patterns. What if the Devourers are responding to something the Council doesn't recognize?" As the weeks passed, the humans continued their unofficial research. They observed, questioned, and analyzed everything around them. And slowly they began to see the galaxy's war in a completely different light. The Council wasn't fighting an invasion. They were fighting an immune response, and they had been on the wrong side for 300 years. The opportunity came during the Battle of Procyon 7, a mining world that the Devourers had surrounded but not yet consumed. War Marshal Thex Vor needed every available ship for what he called the final push to break the siege. Even your pathetic excuse for Soldiers might be useful as a distraction, he told General Stone. Take your humans to the secondary front. Draw some enemy attention while real warriors handle the primary assault. Stone accepted the assignment with appropriate military courtesy. What he didn't tell the war marshal was that being assigned to a secondary front was exactly what his team had been hoping for. Dr. Chen had spent weeks analyzing the Procyon 7 situation. The Devourers had surrounded the planet but hadn't attacked for 3 months. Standard Council doctrine called this a siege, but the pattern was wrong. Sieges were about starving defenders into surrender. The Devourers weren't blockading supplies or communications. They were just waiting. It's like they're studying the planet, she explained to the human team as their transport ship approached the system, looking for something specific before they make their move. Maya Okonkwo had been analyzing the visual data from long-range sensors. The Devourer ships aren't in attack formation. They're in observation formation. See how they're positioned? They're surrounding the planet like scientists around a specimen. James Wright was studying tactical reports from previous battles. Every time the Council attacks, the Devourers respond with minimum necessary force. They're not trying to win battles. They're trying to avoid unnecessary conflict. Dr. Elena Vasquez looked up from her biological analysis equipment. What if they're not here to attack at all? What if they're here to rescue? The human transport ship broke away from the main Council fleet and headed for the outer edge of the Devourer formation. Standard protocol would be to attack immediately, but Stone had other plans. All stations prepare for Operation Conversation, he announced. The humans had spent months preparing for this moment. Instead of weapon systems, their ship carried communication arrays, cultural databases, and translation equipment. Instead of attacking the Devourers, they were going to try something no one had attempted in 300 years. They were going to talk. The first Devourer ship they encountered was smaller than expected, about the size of a Council frigate. It looked organic rather than mechanical, with smooth curves and what might have been sensory organs along its hull. Broadcasting on all frequencies, reported Communications Officer Lisa Park, a former linguist who specialized in nonverbal communication. Standard greeting protocols, mathematical sequences, prime numbers, musical patterns. Anything? Stone asked. Nothing yet, wait. I'm getting something. The response came not as radio signals, but as subtle changes in the Devourer ship's bioelectric field. Dr. Chen's instruments detected fluctuations that might be communication attempts. It's not using technology we recognize, Dr. Chen said. The patterns are more like brain waves than radio transmissions. Maya had an idea. What if we respond the same way? Not with our instruments, but with ourselves? She activated the ship's external speakers and began to sing. Not words, just melody. A simple human song about longing and loss, the kind of music that touched something deep in the human soul. The effect was immediate. The Devourer ship's bioelectric patterns changed, becoming more complex and rhythmic. It was responding to the music. It's working, Dr. Chen whispered. The patterns are synchronizing with Maya's song. Elena activated her behavioral analysis programs. The ship is exhibiting curiosity responses. It's trying to understand what we're doing. Maya continued singing, gradually incorporating more complex emotions into her melody. Joy, fear, hope, grief. The full spectrum of human experience translated into pure sound. The Devourer ship moved closer, its organic hull rippling with patterns of light that seemed to pulse in time with the music. Then something unprecedented happened. It sang back. The sound came through their hull, a deep thrumming that resonated in their bones. It was alien but unmistakably musical, a response that carried its own emotional weight. My God, Maya breathed. It's not just communicating, it's creating art. Dr. Chen's analysis programs went into overdrive. The bioelectric patterns are incredibly complex. This isn't just communication. It's sharing memories, experiences, emotions. What is it trying to tell us? James asked. Maya closed her eyes and listened with every part of her being. The alien song told a story of loss and searching, of a beautiful world that had died and left its children wandering the stars looking for a new home. They're refugees, she said suddenly. The Devourers aren't invaders. They're refugees looking for a place to rebuild their civilization. Elena pulled up her biological analysis data. That makes sense. Their consumption patterns aren't random destruction. They're selective harvesting, They're looking for compatible biological material to reconstruct their lost ecosystem. But why attack the council species? Stone asked. Dr. Chen was already running new analysis programs. What if they're not attacking? What if they're trying to help? She pulled up data from the 47 systems the Devourers had supposedly consumed. Look at this carefully. Every single one of these systems was dying. Stellar collapse, ecological breakdown, toxic contamination. The council wrote them off as lost causes. But the Devourers went there anyway, Elena realized. They consumed the dying systems and rebuilt them, Dr. Chen finished. Look at the long-range sensor data from consumed systems. They're not empty space. They're new ecosystems, different but alive and thriving. The implications hit them all at once. The Devourers weren't destroying worlds. They were healing them. The Council had been fighting a 300-year war against their own salvation. Meanwhile, the alien song continued, growing more complex as more Devourer ships joined the conversation. Maya found herself conducting an interstellar choir, human music blending with alien harmonies to create something entirely new. We need to get this information to the Council, Stone said. They won't believe it. James replied grimly. 300 years of thinking you're fighting monsters doesn't change overnight. Then we make them listen, Dr. Chen said. We prove it. She activated the ship's communication systems and sent a message to the main council fleet. Not a military report, but a scientific proposal. She wanted permission to conduct the first formal diplomatic contact with the Devourers. War Marshal Thexvor's response was immediate and loud. Absolutely not. You will maintain combat distance and await orders for coordinated attack. Sir, we have evidence that the Devourers are not hostile. They may be attempting peaceful contact. The Devourers are parasitic destroyers. Any communication attempts are deception tactics. Stone took over the communication. War Marshal, we request permission to conduct cultural reconnaissance. If we're wrong, you lose nothing. If we're right, you could end a 300-year war. There was a long pause. Then, you have 1 hour for your cultural reconnaissance, then you return to formation for the main assault. 1 hour. It wasn't much time, but it might be enough. Maya deepened her song, weaving in themes of peace, cooperation, and mutual understanding. The Devourer ships responded by opening their hull sections, revealing crystalline structures that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. They're showing us their interiors, Elena breathed. That's a trust gesture in almost every species. Dr. Chen activated every sensor array they had. I'm detecting complex organic systems, not weapons. These look like nurseries? Growing chambers? The largest Devourer ship transmitted a new pattern, more structured than the music, but carrying the same emotional resonance. Dr. Chen's translation program struggled with it, but Maya understood instinctively. They're inviting us aboard, she said. They want to show us something. Stone looked around at his team. Everything they had worked for, everything they had theorized came down to this moment. They could play it safe and return to the Council fleet, or they could take a step into the unknown. All right, he said, let's go make history. The human shuttle docked with the Devourer ship through what appeared to be a living airlock. The interior was unlike anything they had ever seen. Organic corridors that pulsed with gentle light, walls that seemed to breathe, chambers filled with growing things that might have been art or might have been life support systems. And everywhere, the sense of deep sadness mixed with desperate hope. The Devourers themselves were beautiful in an alien way. Creatures of living light and organic metal, they moved like dancers and communicated through color and song. They led the humans to a central chamber where holographic displays showed the galaxy as the Devourers saw it. It was dying, stars burning out ahead of schedule, planets poisoned by industrial waste, entire sectors becoming uninhabitable due to environmental collapse. The Council species, locked in their rigid thinking, were unable to adapt to the changing conditions. But the Devourers could help. They had developed biotechnology that could heal dying worlds, restore damaged ecosystems, even revive extinct species. They had been trying to offer this help for 300 years. Instead, they had been met with warfare. Maya found herself crying as she understood the full tragedy. An entire galaxy's worth of suffering that could have been prevented if anyone had just tried to listen. The Council fleet arrived at Procyon 7 expecting to find the Devourers weakened by the human distraction. Instead, they found something that challenged 300 years of military doctrine. Human and Devourer ships were flying in formation together. War Marshal Thexvor's communication burst across all frequencies, his reptilian voice sharp with outrage. "General Stone! Explain this treachery immediately!" Stone's response was calm and measured. "No treachery, War Marshal. We've established diplomatic contact with the Devourer representatives. They wish to negotiate an end to hostilities." "Impossible. The Devourers cannot be reasoned with." "With respect, sir. We've been reasoning with them for the past 6 hours. They're quite reasonable." Dr. Chen activated the joint communication array they had set up between human and Devourer ships. The message that went out to the Council fleet was unlike anything in galactic history, a simultaneous translation between human spoken language and Devourer bioharmonic. Communication. Council fleet, the message began. "We are the gardeners you call Devourers. We seek an end to the unnecessary conflict between our peoples." The response from the Council ships was immediate weapons lock-ons. Every gun in the fleet trained on the diplomatic formation. "Stone," Thexvor snarled, "you will break contact with enemy forces and return to formation immediately." "I'm afraid I can't do that, War Marshal. We're in the middle of the most important conversation in galactic history." Maya's voice joined the transmission. Her words translated into the harmonic patterns the Devourers used for complex emotional communication. "We understand your fear. For 300 years you have seen us as destroyers, but we are healers. We consume only what is dying, and from it we create new life." Elena added her biological analysis to the data stream. "We have documented evidence that systems consumed by the gardeners are not destroyed but transformed. Dead worlds become living ecosystems. Failed colonies become thriving communities." The Council fleet held position, but no one fired. Confusion was spreading through their ranks as the impossible became undeniable. "Lies. Thexvor broadcast. Deceptive propaganda designed to weaken our resolve." That's when the gardeners played their final card. The largest Devourer ship opened its central bay doors, revealing something that made every Council officer gasp in shock. It was a perfect replica of Thexari Prime, the reptilian homeworld that had been evacuated 50 years ago due to ecological collapse. But this version was alive. Green forests covered continents that had been barren. Blue oceans filled basins that had been empty. Cities bustled with activity where only ruins had remained. "Your people," the gardener communication continued. "Those who chose to stay behind when your world was declared dead. We saved them. We healed their world. They live now in harmony with a restored ecosystem." The transmission included bioelectric recordings from actual Thexari survivors, War Marshal Thexvor's own species speaking of their gratitude to the beings who had given them back their world. D.A. Warfleet hung motionless in space as 3 centuries of certainty crumbled. James Wright seized the moment. "War Marshal, we propose a joint investigation of previously consumed systems. Let Council science teams verify our claims. If we're lying, you can resume hostilities. If we're telling the truth, and if you're telling the truth," came a new voice, "then we have been committing genocide for 300 years." The speaker was Council Prime Zaranal, leader of the Delphian delegation and the highest-ranking civilian authority in the fleet. Her aquatic form rippled with distress as she absorbed the implications. "Council Prime," Thexvor protested, "these creatures have obviously compromised the humans. This is clearly an infiltration tactic designed to weaken our defenses." Dr. Chen had anticipated this reaction. "War Marshal, we can prove our claims are real. The gardeners have offered to restore a Council world under direct observation. You can watch the entire process, document every step, verify that no harm comes to the inhabitants." "Which world?" Council Prime Zaranal asked. The answer came from the gardener ship, translated through Maya's music into words everyone could understand. "New Threxia. The colony world your people abandoned last year due to atmospheric contamination. It can be saved." The silence that followed was deafening. New Threxia had been written off as a total loss. 40 million Threx had been evacuated when the planet's atmosphere became toxic due to industrial accidents. The terraforming cost would have bankrupted the Council. "You're saying you can fix New Threxia?" asked Hive Queen Zeska, speaking for the first time since the conversation began. "We can do more than fix it," came the reply. "We can make it better than it was before. Cleaner air, richer soil, more diverse ecosystems. Your people could return home." Dr. Elena Vasquez transmitted her complete biological analysis. Their biotechnology is centuries ahead of ours. They don't just repair damage, they optimize entire planetary systems for long-term stability. But why? Council Prime Zaranal asked. Why would you help us after we've been fighting you for so long? The answer came not in words but in pure emotion, transmitted through the bioharmonic link. Sadness for all the lives lost to misunderstanding, hope for a better future, and above all, the deep need to nurture and protect life wherever it could be found. Maya translated the emotional content into words. Because that's what they are. They're gardeners in the truest sense. They see dying worlds and want to make them bloom again. They see suffering and want to heal it. The galaxy is changing, added Dr. Chen. Stars are aging faster than predicted. Climate systems are becoming unstable. The old technologies aren't enough anymore. But the gardeners have adapted. They've learned to work with natural processes instead of against them. War Marshal Thex Vor made one last attempt to maintain the old paradigm. This is madness. We cannot trust creatures that have consumed 47 star systems. They haven't consumed anything, James Wright replied firmly. They've been performing 300 years of unpaid environmental restoration work while we've been shooting at them for trying to help. The debate that followed lasted hours. Some council officers refused to believe what they were hearing. Others demanded immediate cessation of hostilities. Still others called for careful verification of all claims. In the end, it was the gardeners themselves who proposed the solution. They would demonstrate their abilities on New Threxia under complete council observation. If the process worked and the planet was successfully restored, negotiations could begin for a permanent peace. If it failed or if any deception was detected, the war could resume. One question, Council Prime Zaranal said. If your intentions are peaceful, why didn't you try to communicate earlier? Why did it take humans to establish this contact? The gardener response carried deep sadness. We tried. For 300 years we tried. Every approach to your worlds was met with weapons fire. Every attempt at communication was interpreted as attack. We began to believe peaceful contact was impossible. Until we met humans, the message continued. Humans who looked at our actions and saw healing instead of destruction. Humans who listened to our songs and heard sorrow instead of aggression. Humans who asked why instead of simply fighting. Maya felt tears on her cheeks as she translated the final part of the message. Humans who taught us that even after 300 years of war, peace was still possible. The restoration of New Threxia took place over 6 months, with council observers documenting every step. The gardeners didn't just clean the toxic atmosphere, they redesigned it for optimal health. They didn't just repair the damaged soil, they enriched it with nutrients that would support more diverse plant life than the planet had ever known. When the first Threx colonists returned to their restored world, they found it transformed into a paradise that exceeded their wildest dreams. The peace treaty was signed on New Threxia, under skies bluer than the planet had ever seen. The council formally apologized for 3 centuries of misunderstanding. The gardeners forgave 3 centuries of violence, and humanity was given a unique role in the new galactic community. The council has always been ruled by logic and efficiency, Council Prime Zaranal explained at the ceremony. But logic without wisdom becomes rigid. Efficiency without compassion becomes cruel. We need perspectives that can see beyond our evolutionary programming. Dr. Chen found herself appointed as the first director of interspecies understanding, with Dr. Elena Vasquez as her deputy. Maya Okonkwo became the first galactic cultural ambassador, using art and music to facilitate communication between species that had never learned to talk to each other. James Wright established the Diplomatic Corps' first Department of Creative Solutions, training negotiators to think beyond conventional frameworks when dealing with seemingly impossible conflicts. General Stone retired from military service to become head of the new Peacekeeping Academy, where beings from across the galaxy learned that the most powerful weapon in the universe was the willingness to understand your enemy's point of view. The galaxy that emerged from the peace was transformed. Worlds that had been dying for decades were restored to health. Species that had been locked in ancient conflicts learned to work together. Technologies that had stagnated for centuries began advancing again, as different perspectives combined to create new solutions.